All right, kids, welcome to another episode of the Freezin 4 NFC North Podcast, episode number 13. We have a lot to talk about, division coaching moves. Also, we have a special Packers guest. But with us, as always, above me is Cooper. How's it going?
It's going pretty good. Just stay away from Vikings Twitter and you'll be happy.
Great turnout by Kirk Cousins at the Pro Bowl. We'll just say that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's the skills competition went okay, And honestly, come on, he won the accuracy contest 2 years ago, and for flaming him on that, whatever, he's messing around in a hoodie. Right? It's oh my god, and you guys know me. I'm not a fan, right?
But I got you going right away. Right away.
He's just messing around in a hoodie. Leave the guy alone.
In the other corner, we have our Lions guy. Welcome back, Gridiron Grubb. How's it going?
Great to be back, man. Good to see you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do have some Lions stuff to talk about, but obviously we'll get to Packers first. And welcome, Daniele. How's it going?
What's up? To your point there about staying off of Vikings Twitter, Packers Twitter is no better.
Is it worse? Oh my god.
It's
off season. It's off season.
Especially on Thursdays.
It's a toxic wasteland. Yeah.
Yes. And welcome our special guest. I want to say it right. It is Monty.
Yes, like Monty Python.
Great movies. Movies. But your Twitter handle is Ferd Turgeson.
Yes, it's just a playoff turd Ferguson, who's the greatest Celebrity Jeopardy contestant of all time.
I would agree on
Rest
that.
in peace, Norm Macdonald.
Mm-hmm. All great stuff. Well, we have a lot to get into, even though it is, Super Bowl week. None of our teams are in it, as we all predicted, right?
No.
Oh, of course. Yeah, of course.
So with the Packers, I mean, there's a lot to kind of get into. There's a little bit of drama, I guess. So where do we see the Packers going, and then Rodgers? I mean, do we have a next move for Aaron Rodgers?
So, I mean, I feel like and Danielle can confirm this or not, but I feel like for most Packers fans, you fall into two camps of what you think is going to happen and what you want to happen. I personally think they're going to run it back again. I think they're kind of going to find themselves in that New Orleans Saints type of situation where they're going to keep trying to run it back for 1 or 2 years until it's obviously time to cut bait and to start over again. So yeah, I think they're going to try to bring him back, and I think they try to bring Adams back with him. I'm probably in the minority where I'm fine no matter what they do, but if I had to choose, I would prefer they just move on. And that's not me saying that I don't like Aaron Rodgers or I think he's any worse than he ever has been or anything. I think it's just, for me, it comes down to this team this year was the best I think they've had in a long time and the best chance they're going to have. So if they didn't get it done this year, running it back again requires you to rely on more things falling your way and kind of getting lucky. And that's a risky proposition, in my opinion.
Yeah. Out of resources too. I mean, you say you don't want to end up like the Saints. You're on the doorstep. You're about 20 million short of where they are right now. But yeah, the difference between 50 and 70 million over the cap is, you don't want either of them.
That's significant.
Yeah.
And there is the argument to be made that overall, the NFC will be weaker next year, and that's probably true.
Worse quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean, it won't be as top heavy and have as many dominant teams or anything, but it's so. If you have the best quarterback, so that's always the ace in the hole, but it's just in general to overcome even more next year, because as injured as they were, they got healthy towards the end of the season and into the playoffs. So who knows if that injury luck you can replicate next year. So it's a lot of what ifs, where this year was more laid out pretty finite what you had in front of you.
Yeah. And when you talk about, things that kind of let the Packers down, a lot of it. I mean, we'll get to Rodgers more in a second here, but the special teams really let them down, and now they have a new special teams coach. Is that going to, be the fix it?
I think it's the start, but I mean, you can't just throw him in there with the same exact pieces that we had this past season because it's just going to go the same exact way. I'm not sure any coach could fix what we had or what we
Yeah, I
had.
mean, I think
So-
they did a good job of identifying, like, and it wasn't hard to identify, like, a large weakness and hole in the team, and they filled it with a competent hire from outside the building that wasn't just we're going to promote, the last guy's assistant like they did last time. So that does say something that they're taking it seriously. And when players get signed and stuff, the first thing we know about is how much they make in their contracts. Like, coaches and front office people are way closer to the vest with that. So we know that he's probably going to be the highest paid special teams coach in the league. Who knows what that dollar figure is?
Wow.
But that does show that, like, they're recognizing, like, this is a huge weakness. We're going to do all we can at this point to fix it. And like Danielle said, like, just getting the coach doesn't solve your problems, but that's the best place to start. And they made what seems to be, and what everyone, the consensus looks to be, is a competent, like, big time hire in that part of the team.
This may be. Oh, go ahead, Danielle.
Just hopefully he brings some different kind of mentality to that
Right.
unit.
Yeah, I mean, they got to change it up because yeah, whatever they were trying with multiple different coaches just didn't work, and personnel is for sure part of that. But I mean, there's no way you can have, on the deciding field goal of your season, you don't even have enough guys out on the field. Like, you can't.
Yeah.
You can't keep that coach.
Yeah, more common than you think. More common than you think, but not on that play. You can't do it then.
That's literally your season on the line. And like, I don't think anyone believes that if that 11th guy was on the field, he was going to block the kick or anything. But it's the principle.
It speaks to the overall quality, which was low. Right. Just in general, it's like, oh yeah, that's what a bad coach would do.
Does anybody know? Are there limits, to the, like, a cap as far as pay, like coaches, salaries?
They don't count against the cap.
They are not capped.
That's all up to the team and the owners.
Yep.
They have weird contracts too sometimes.
Yeah.
Like there's offsets and stuff if you get coached.
I feel like the only thing we ever hear is, like, when a coach is close to their contract coming up, right? But the numbers are almost never discussed. It's just
Zimmer's going to get paid for 2 more years to be a head coach of the Minnesota Vikings. Spielman's going to get paid for 2 years too to be the GM of the Minnesota Vikings, and they're going to both working for other teams probably. Yeah.
And they did well.
Yeah, they did. They had a run.
Well,
I mean, luckily none of that hits the cap.
No, yeah, exactly, and that's why the Wilfs are good owners, because they just never give a crap. They're like, oh yeah, check, nope, cut it.
Yeah, the Wilfs will spend the money. They don't care,
and they keep their mouth shut too. They're like, oh, you need money? All right, cool. There you go, bye.
Well, speaking of the cap, with the Packers, they're pretty far over the cap, and what do they do kind of with? First of all, obviously with Devontae Adams and the other free agents, how are they going to make things work to run it back, as you say, Monty?
I mean, obviously the biggest domino is whatever, Rodgers decides. And I believe him when he said, the decision's going to come fairly quickly. I would think like maybe by mid-March, because that's kind of where the franchise tag deadline is looming. So that has to be the biggest domino. And once you figure that out, then like everything else kind of falls into place, because if you bring him back, you're more inclined to bring back the rest of those pieces that are also either up for contracts or will be soon. Mm-hmm. So you have guys like, a Randall Cobb or a Mercedes Lewis, where you're probably not bringing them back if Rodgers isn't back. So that has to be the biggest first domino. And there's going to be tons of speculation, and you're going to see, all these lists of like Packers free agents who should come back, who shouldn't. Like, none of that matters until Rodgers decides what he wants to do. And then I think all that stuff starts to fall into place pretty quickly.
Yeah. And I guess, there's some easy choices and tough choices, right? So Zadarius Smith and Preston Smith pretty much have to go if you want to run it back, right? both linebackers, almost certainly. And then you're still making tough choices. Maybe Rodgers gets that cap hit down, but then you're paying like void years in 2025 for Aaron Rodgers, and like that doesn't sound fun. So yeah, there's definitely. I mean, it's easy to decide if to and if not to, but it's going to be tricky. Going to be tricky for whoever's working that cap.
And I just think in general, I mean, you're going to decide where you want the short-term future of this team to be, because if Rodgers isn't there, you're going to lean on a young defense that played extremely well in a playoff game. So like that's a building block. But to talk about like the Smiths specifically, yeah, I mean, I think as close to anything as is a sure thing in this world, like Z is probably gone. I actually do think Preston gets restructured, and they probably do want to keep him. And that's just only because they're pretty thin at that position in general.
Yeah, he'll be cheaper too.
Yeah, I mean, so if you can restructure him and bring him back, then you're not, a team like the Packers, like you kind of view everything through the lens of what they want their draft strategy to be, right? And if you're down Preston Smith and Zadarius Smith, and you're left with Rashawn Gary and then a bunch of, kind of names that most people don't know about at outside linebacker, you're locking yourself into needing like an edge early in the draft.
Yeah, and that's tough. You never want to do that. That's what the Vikings have been doing for the last couple of years, where it's like, we'll draft the replacement. It's like, okay, I'll roll the die, and if it comes up on 6, it worked, and if it comes up on 1 through 5, because even if they're good, right, Penei Sewell might be really good, right? Even if they're good, it doesn't necessarily matter their rookie season. And the Vikings ran into this. Oh, yeah, they drafted a really good left tackle. He was actually surprisingly good. Oh, he's injured half the season, and now we have Rashad Hill, and they're losing us games, right? So, like, when you do that, you really start to mortgage, like, you're really starting to gamble with, like, a credit card, right? Like, it can bounce back quick. It's an interesting decision, and it's funny because I have the exact same opinion about what I think the Vikings should do. But for you, it's so much harder because it's like, oh, it's Aaron Rodgers and that defense. For me, it's Kirk Cousins and like the 28th ranked defense, right? So that's interesting. You can almost convince me that they should blow it up.
Yeah, and part of the reason why I'm saying, like, obviously I love Rodgers. I would love to have him back, but I mean, I'm 35, so the Packers have been good literally my entire life. Yeah. Like, I'm not gonna die if they're bad for 3 years.
Embrace the void. Yeah.
It's not gonna kill me to see them to struggle for a little bit.
Careful with that tightrope, because a couple years can become a long time.
And Danny, you're the same way, right? You're at peace with the decision either way, is what you've said in the past.
Yeah. Like I said the squeaky point. Last year, I mean, we were kind of blindsided last offseason. We didn't know all of this was going to be happening. We didn't know there was anything wrong between him and the organization. So we're all kind of taken back by it. And I think it makes a big difference knowing that now we know it's a possibility that he's not going to be there. So now we're kind of preparing ourselves for that. But yeah, I'm at peace with it because he's going to be leaving soon through retirement.
Yeah, anyway,
sooner than later. So you do not want him to retire and then not be able to get anything for him.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's the biggest difference is like last year it wouldn't have like felt like it was time, and now it kind of just feels like it might be time, and maybe that's enough, right? It's obviously not going to go over well regardless of how he leaves in general, but it feels more like it might be the right decision way more than it did this time last year.
Yeah.
I'm good with
him coming back. Obviously, it's Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
If you have him, you have a chance. But at the same time, like I said, I don't want him to retire in a year or two, and then the Packers don't get all that trade value for him.
Exactly.
You might as well cut it right now, get what you can for him, and prepare for the future. But either way, whatever happens, I'm going to be okay. I'm not going to. Like I said last week, I will be heartbroken when he is not our quarterback, because that's Aaron Rodgers. He's been our quarterback for years. It's going to be heartbreaking.
And if you put this through the lens of like how the team is viewing it, I mean, either way it goes, obviously people are going to be upset. But in general, they've placed themselves in a perfect position, right? Because, okay, either the 4-time MVP and current back-to-back MVP, who I think you guys would probably all agree is going to win this weekend. it comes back for your team for however long, or you get a ridiculous amount of capital for him. I would argue more than any player that's ever been dealt, because I don't even think an MVP has ever been traded, a current MVP, much less a back-to-back
MVP. Yeah, that's actually wild to think about. Yeah.
So you either get a bunch back for him and he's gone, and if the guy that they've earmarked works out in Jordan Love, that's great. If he doesn't work out, you have all that capital you just got from Aaron Rodgers to find the next guy. So, I mean, franchise overall can't lose. One just plays out a little bit longer than the other, but it's hard to argue they haven't put themselves in a good position regardless of the outcome.
Well, to me, I think their problem becomes if they do try to make this, if they do try to run this back, then scratch the future for a long, long, long time. Because
it's hard to disagree with that.
There's no way they can pay all these guys and not be destroyed over the next few years, and they'll never be able to rebuild for years and years down the road.
It's going to be what we're going to see from the Saints. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
you're totally
if they run it back this next season, just like that's it. That's what you get for the next probably 7-8 years till they can fix what's going on there cap wise. It's just, they're not going to have any assets again if Rodgers stays. They're going to lose. I just think as a Packers fan, for fans of the Packers, it's hard to say, right? You don't want Aaron Rodgers to leave, and you don't want Davante Adams to leave, but I don't see how they make it happen this year. I don't even see how they get those guys and have a competitive team with just those two players around them, because they're going to have to get rid of a lot just to keep those two players playing together.
Yeah, and it feels
you're talking about special teams being an issue. Well, how are they going to bring in guys? I know those are the bottom of the payroll, but how are you going to bring in guys that are going to make you an all-around solid team where the Packers' weaknesses were this season and what cost them in the playoffs? How do you change that if you pay all these two guys? You have to, because they got to clear so much cap space just to sign just Davante Adams. They've got to clear stuff. I mean, we're talking again, right? They're $50 million, but
60, 70 for sure. Yeah.
So you got to clear $70 million just to tag Davante. I mean, I don't know how they do that and restructure all those contracts and keep the players, even to run it back. I just don't know. I think it destroys this team for the future, even if they try to get one more with Aaron Rodgers. And that's
and we mentioned
the tough thing.
We mentioned the Saints specifically, but the one I don't like, the worst case scenario for me is if you look at the current Steelers and the current Falcons, like those are both teams. They had a quarterback that they just keep trying to hang on one more year and seeing if they can do it with this guy for one more year. And they're in purgatory right now. Like this QB draft class is garbage. So the Steelers aren't going to find their future guy this year. The Falcons are hanging on to Matt Ryan for a little bit longer, but they're in purgatory too. Neither of those teams has a set succession plan. So for the Packers to have what they believe to be a succession plan, because they earmarked a guy and drafted him in the first round, you would like to see them, if they really believe in that, to follow that plan. Because if they get stuck in this no man's land where, Rodgers hangs on for 2 or 3 more years and they still aren't getting it done, by that time you've had to decide whether or not you're going to pay Jordan Love, and you've never really even seen him play yet.
Right.
And that's
what I say. What happens in 2 to 3 years from now, if they do run it back for just one more year? You're looking at a deep hole. But you mentioned the Falcons, Monty. You have to look what they had to do this offseason, right? They had to go with a just beat down roster around that, right?
Exactly.
Because
he had
that's
no
what they had to do. They had to get rid of Julio. They had to get rid of these people, and that's what the Packers will have to do. Even if they keep Aaron Rodgers 1 or 2 more years, he's going to have nothing around him that they can afford. So they're going to have to bargain bin shop, and that's what the Falcons did this year. And they played some competitive football, but again, are you going to get the best out of that if you're a Packers fan? Just like Danielle said, is it best to just get what you can get this season, especially with the Broncos over there, nipping at this, because John Elway and these guys, they'll spend they'll throw it at you.
Yeah, well, they're desperate, and I mean,
they'll throw it at you for him. So it's kind of a tough decision to make, but they will throw. They're going to throw a bunch at you if you're willing to go that route.
I mean, tell me if you guys agree.
Just while we're on the Falcons real quick too, Matt Ryan set to be the highest paid in the NFL next year at 48
right.
cap.
Yeah, right. See, and like
with no talent around him.
That is
with no talent around him.
They have no chance of winning anything next year, and they're locked into him. But like, tell me if you guys agree. Like, I would argue that there's 32 teams. Like, I would argue that probably close to 17 or 18 are like near QB desperate, right? Like they're searching, or they don't have a guy that they know they can count on. So like, no matter what, like this market for Aaron Rodgers is going to be absurd. But like, I say like, I wish they would move on because I want them to get the draft, the capital and everything for him. Like if they run it back again, like I'm sure as hell going to cheer them on. I'm going to be behind it, right? Like just because I don't agree with the decision doesn't mean I'm not going to like root for the team.
When Aaron Rodgers throws that first touchdown, we're gonna be like,
of course I'm gonna love it. But it's just more of the, like the rest of this division. If Rodgers comes back, like as fans of the other teams, like would you guys agree that all three of your teams are in some form of a rebuild?
Oh yeah,
should be.
So,
but
so people keep saying like, oh, the Packers will definitely be a playoff team if Rodgers comes back. They'll win the division. But like winning the division hasn't been the mark for this team for like 4 years now. Like, I mean, that's a given.
But that's kind of where I'm going too, Monty. That's what I was saying. Like, how do they bring Aaron Rodgers back? How do they run this back and then be competitive in the playoffs in the spots that cost you in the playoffs, which were on your back end? Yeah. And which was on your special teams, and how do they fix those things if I don't see it getting any better for when you are in the playoffs, and offensive line is going to have to change and restructure, and defensive line possibly, and linebackers, and you're looking at this being almost like a rebuild to build around Aaron Rodgers for one season.
And they I was going to say, they only have, I think Amari Rodgers and some others, wide receivers that are really under contract. You throw Adams, it's really tough. But I wanted to, throw this take in here too, because like, I think we've talked about, is it even worth it? Like Grubb, you're saying, down the road to mortgage the future. But when you look at Rodgers, he just has really seemed to, shrivel in the playoffs. Like I looked and we talked about this last week, and I don't really see Aaron Rodgers as a top 5 playoff quarterback. I mean, he's just, he was not on. I mean, overthrowing receivers and just, he was just not really, seemed to make the right decision. He was locked in on one receiver. Like the greatest quarterbacks in the playoffs, they don't do that. They're not locked in on one receiver, so for all of this, MVP talk, I don't really know, is Aaron Rodgers even all that good?
So like, obviously I think objectively, like watch Aaron Rodgers play a game of NFL football and like
regular season. I mean, playoffs though.
Like plenty jumps off the page. And I will say that like a lot of people are prisoners of the moment, like including like fans of the team that root for the guy. And that, he absolutely played not good at all in this most recent game. He played only good for a half of the game against Tampa last year. And then in 2019, I mean, that team just really didn't have a chance against San Francisco in that game. So that's like what you're recently looking at with Aaron Rodgers playoff games. And part of that is you only are really remembering when they lose, because like no one talks about the fact that like he played dynamite against the Seahawks. He played dynamite last year against the Rams in the divisional round, both of those games.
He did play dynamite against Caleb Haney in the NFC Championship as well. So. His bar is so stupid high anyway. You feel like those games he plays well, you really write off because you expect him to play well. But is he clutch though? That's the thing. I just don't, I don't know if he has that clutch gene.
It's like hard. Like it
in the playoffs.
That's why this conversation can always come up, because there are playoff games, right, where like I don't care who you are, like if your defense is giving up 37, 45, 38, 36 points, like that's hard. Like you're hard pressed to match that output of any team. But I think that's a measure of how great he actually is, though, because you're seeing a playoff game where his defense gives up 45 points, and you will still say, like, well, how come Aaron Rodgers didn't get it done? And it's just like, you expect him to do it because he's that good.
I agree, Monty, and I have to say, like, I mean, I'm going to give Aaron Rodgers credit where credit's due, because look at how situations happen. People want to give Tom Brady all this credit, but that 28-3 game in the Super Bowl, that had very little to do with Tom Brady except for towards the end of the game. The rest of that had to do with a defense that totally dominated the Falcons in the second half. And Tom Brady's career has been built in the playoffs off of how dominant defensive teams have played for him. And then it comes down, because you give Tom Brady that chance at the end, he can make it happen. And Aaron Rodgers, he sometimes, just like Monty's saying, there's been times where the defense lets them, they get destroyed in the game, and it's too much to put on Aaron Rodgers' shoulders, where, Tom Brady's had all this success due to a lot of those things. Not only is he what he is as the GOAT right now of quarterbacks, but he did his thing built off of his early career was all defense. Those Super Bowls were won, 13-10 and 16-13. I mean, Tom Brady didn't do all that. Like, and I think Aaron Rodgers gets too much of beef for that. It takes a team. That's what I say. A playoff team is what's important. When you get in the playoffs, everybody's got to be in it. You got to have special teams play good, defenses play good.
I'm in that camp of, like, I don't believe win-loss is a QB stat thing, but I'm in the minority of Packers fans, and Danielle will tell you guys, like, I actually like Tom Brady. Like, I'm a Tom Brady fan. And I
love him and respect him.
Yeah, I don't think Tom Brady being the best quarterback ever takes away from anything Aaron Rodgers has ever done or ever will do. And that's why I don't like necessarily those conversations, because, like, one guy being great doesn't mean another guy's any less great. But yeah, I mean, Aaron Rodgers has had plenty of huge clutch moments. I mean, like, obviously the first two that come to mind are, like, the 2010 divisional game against Atlanta. Like, the Packers rolled in there. He put up, like, the greatest quarterback game in the playoffs of all time. And, like, you think about 2016 in Dallas, like the Jared Cook play. Like, he's got moments. It's just, you hold him to such high standard. When he doesn't meet it, it feels more dramatic when he doesn't get there. And B, I mean, like, there's so many articles out there that you could read that deep dive into, like, how he's lost all of his playoff games. But I would agree with you guys in general. I mean, I think there has been plenty of games where he hasn't played well enough, but he also, unfortunately, no quarterback should have to be perfect to overcome a bunch of other stuff that is out of his control. So that's why this discussion will go on forever, because there's so much nuance to it, way more than Aaron Rodgers won a game or lost a game.
Well, until he's a Bronco next year.
Now that I'm thinking about that, I just pulled that up. So 4-0, right? Of course, 68% completion percentage in 4 games, 1,094 yards, 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 8.3 yards per attempt. Oh my god!
Yeah. The numbers are wild, individually absurd.
Like, that's just that one Super Bowl run, which was, of course, magical. Overall, though, I mean, 11-10, right? 5,000, almost 6,000 yards. That's pretty crazy. But no, 45 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, right? Quarterback rating 100, 54 or like 7.6 yards per attempt. So that's like a good quarterback, which is kind of how sometimes you have to play in the playoffs.
I mean, in the playoffs, you're facing better defenses.
Let me ask you this, though, like
9 yards per attempt.
Is he the Kirk Cousins of the playoffs? Is that what it is?
Well, this season, this playoffs, I mean, was it Jimmy Garoppolo that won the games for the 49ers? Was that all Jimmy G? Exactly. I mean, so
I think
it's
his
like
QBR in the Packer game was literally like 20 or something.
And that's
like
it takes a special team to get to the Super Bowl, and that's why they say that, because you have to have an all-around balanced team, and you got it. And the unfortunate thing for Aaron Rodgers is, again, we talked about this when I told you guys a few weeks ago. I had the 49ers winning that game, but because it takes this, it's always a play. It's always a play that doesn't get made, or it's always a play that the other team makes against Green Bay. And so that's just how it was. And the same thing happened in that game, right? The punt block. That was Aaron Rodgers did not make that happen, and so this whole Green Bay thing, this whole thing comes down to a special teams play that had nothing to do with Aaron Rodgers. Now, could he play better in the game? Yes. But again, man, we're talking about freezing temperature and putting everything on Aaron Rodgers' shoulders. And they kept throwing the football. That Aaron Rodgers, if he was making those plays and he was making that decision, then that is on his shoulders. But if the coach was calling all of those plays, that was his offensive scheme in freezing weather, then that was a problem too, if you ask me. And that's not all on Aaron Rodgers' shoulders.
Yeah, and I consider myself to be like a realist, right? Like if I know my team plays bad and you come at me and tell me that they played like shit, like I'm probably going to agree. Like I can admit when they played badly. And I will say that this was probably, as bad as the special teams was, in my opinion, the fact that the special teams was bad all year, and you almost, like, Danielle, would you agree? You almost go into a game expecting them to screw up, right? So
Yeah.
Seeing that happen in the game wasn't that shocking, but I would argue that this loss, more than any other ones he's been a part of, you could put on him more than some of those other ones.
Yeah, because you cannot be the MVP of the league, go in with number 1 seed into home field advantage, and still lose the game when the opposing quarterback doesn't score a freaking touchdown.
Yeah.
Like you cannot be the MVP and not, like you said, you can't expect the quarterback to go in there and playing perfectly. But you know what? It's Aaron Rodgers. You're the MVP. Like I said, you have number 1 seed, home field advantage. You have got to play well enough to where those 2 special team blunders that did happen would not have mattered.
Yeah, and
when the other team's not scoring a touchdown.
Right, we all watched the game. I mean, I'm sure, like, tell me if you guys agree.
No,
when they stopped them on 4th and 1 with like 6 minutes left, you knew right then, you're like, okay, the Packers go down and score a touchdown here, game is over. Like, the 49ers cannot score. Like, they would be playing from behind, so Jimmy G, who was trying to throw picks all game, would have been throwing the rest of the game.
Yeah.
So you expect, like, the back-to-back MVP with 6 minutes left at near midfield, they're going to go down there and get points and put this shitty game behind them and move on to next week.
The great ones get it done. The great ones do get it done. And that's what you were saying. Like, yes, Tom Brady carried by the defense, but when he's on the 50 and you need a touchdown, it's like, okay, we'll give you one. Give you one. Right?
When Mahomes did it with 13 seconds, Mahomes, right?
Right.
When we all watched the Bucks and Rams the next day, and like Brady, like the way I described it was, it felt like when you were watching that Packers-Niners game, like especially from a Packers fan perspective, the longer the game went being close, the closer to like catastrophe you were getting.
Yep.
Then you watch the Bucks and the Rams the next day, and you could feel like the Bucks comeback building, even though they were down 24 points. Yeah. It's just like putting that in your frame of mind, just like how you feel when you're watching these games. Like, I think that's telling.
And to me, I think that's a difference in leadership roles. The people, the players on every team Tom Brady has played for, they show up. They get down. There's just something about they don't want to let him down.
Yeah.
Whereas you don't see that in Green Bay. You don't see these other players besides Adams and a few guys saying, I don't want to let this guy down. But when it's Tom Brady, that whole team comes together as a collective. You see them all the time. They come together on the sideline, defense, offense. They get together, and there's just something about it, magical, that he carries with him as a leadership role. And I to be honest, to me, I have not seen that from an Aaron Rodgers-led team his entire career. He is a great quarterback, but there's just something about his teammates who, when it is time in that tough time in the trenches, they're not the ones who step up and make the play. And that's what happens when the Tom Brady-led team is his players around him, his teammates, his defense, they step up. The kicker kicks a 60-yard field goal to win the game. Like, everybody steps up when it's their time to do the job. And it seems like almost the opposite happens in Aaron Rodgers-led teams. And it's not a knock on him as a person, but it's just something about that leadership quality that I think misses out on him when it becomes to a special time, when it comes to playoff time.
Yeah, and we're talking about, right, like, we're talking intangibles now, right? So it's extremely hard to like measure. Yeah. Do I think player X is better than player Y because of something intangible? And I stray away from like any comparison or like getting into a debate. Like, don't compare any player or team or organization to like what the Patriots did, because like number one, like we're probably never going to see it again. Like it is such an anomaly on all levels. Like you're doing whatever players you root for a disservice by holding up to a standard that you can't really meet, right? So I just think that kind of stuff, yeah, maybe when you get into the playoffs, like that kind of stuff does matter, like intangibles. But, and I'm gonna say this with like a little bit of bias, like even based on what we've seen, like if you're gonna tell me like if a game is played on paper, which is why this is such a great game because it's not played on paper. If I need a quarterback to win one,
which is why analytics suck.
Like if I needed a quarterback to win one game, I probably would pick Aaron Rodgers just because I believe he can do more directly related to the game, what I can see, than a Tom Brady will. But that's not going to stop me from saying there's a reason Tom Brady has been able to take his game to different levels.
So I have an overreaction here. Aaron Rodgers has appeared in his last Super Bowl.
I don't know.
A long time ago.
I don't know if that's an overreaction at this point because he's what, 38?
No,
Yeah,
that's an easy one.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, he might like if he lands on the Steelers or maybe like the Broncos.
He's gonna be a Bronco.
Betting against like at this point you'd have to bet against time in general. And now if you would have asked this question when Rodgers is what, like 33,
right?
Even like
that
3
would
or
be
4
an
years ago,
overreaction, I believe.
Yeah,
it's actually shocking that they didn't make a like in this run, which has been like such an understated dominance.
I think
where like they
looking
lose
back,
like 7 games and
hindsight is 2020. I honestly, I would agree that Aaron Rodgers and before this season happened, I think I was talking about he's don't bet against Rodgers, but just the way he performed, and then looking back in retrospect, when it counts in the playoffs, he just there's always been an excuse, and so that's always interesting to kind of look. So it is it might be in the best interest of the Packers to move on, and it'll be interesting to see where that goes. And so I do have one other overreaction too that actually I was trying to listen to Packer radio today, and some of it's just I just can't listen to it. It's just horrible. Basically there was a caller that said, well, not even a call. I think, some of the commentators were, saying, oh, if they just do this and this, and with Jordan Love, the Packers can be in a Super Bowl in 2 years. What do you overreaction? Jordan Love will lead the Packers to Super Bowl within 2 years if he starts.
I'd be mad. I'd be so mad.
Oh, yes.
I'd be so
yes.
mad. I'd be toxic. I'd be toxic to everyone around me.
I mean, I'll let you go. Go ahead, Danielle. I'll let you go first.
I was just gonna say I'd be insufferable if that happened.
Yeah, I mean,
you don't want to follow me on Twitter if that happens.
Right.
I would be pulling mad receipts if that happened. But like, I just think that's what makes this entire scenario so fascinating, right? Because if you have already, whether you're a Packers fan or a fan of a team that roots against Green Bay or a neutral fan, if you have already decided what Jordan Love is going to be, like, I don't think your argument is really worth hearing in general,
That's
right?
a good point. Yep.
Like, you can say you don't think he'll be good, or you can say you think he will be good, but you haven't seen enough yet to make anything definitive. Like, and I think a big reason that I'm ready to just see if he has it or not is because I don't think anything else matters life post Aaron Rodgers unless you know Jordan Love is good or not. And I think what obviously the team has everything they see in practice and all the mini camps and all that stuff. And they have the 6 quarters of regular season NFL football he's played. If you take that and put that on top of an entire season's worth of starting in the league, you have at least a pretty good idea.
He's not Joe Burrow. I just promised that.
Oh, yeah, like
whether he's going to be good or not, he's not Joe Burrow. And there's a reason he went where he went in the draft, and there's a reason he's not playing now.
And there's and he gets held to, I hope he doesn't get held under the same umbrella or standard as guys like you said, a Joe Burrow or a Justin Herbert, because those guys, I will even say Justin Fields, like those guys all were entering the draft as touted as pro-ready quarterbacks. Like they are ready to play if they have to right away. Jordan Love was taken as a pure project. Like he's not ready yet.
Right. And I'm just saying not in 2 years. I'm saying having a Super Bowl under Jordan Love in the next season after this next one, it would be, I mean, to me, if you ask me it would be remarkable. Yeah. With the Packers cap situation and him coming in.
I would not expect them, like, as soon as you tell me Aaron Rodgers isn't coming back, I don't think they're in contention for, like I said, 3 years.
Until further notice, honestly. Just until you land a quarterback or you find a formula, a new identity or whatever.
They do have to find out what Love has, and I totally agree. You know, I mean, Monty, I agree. Like they've got to find out, and Danielle, even when we had the show, like we've talked about this. Like they've got to find out what Love has, but when's that going to happen? You know, and if they hold on to Rodgers for 1 more year or 2 more years, or they drag this out, right, and they keep trying to run it back as much as they can, you know, when do you get to find out what he has? And if he's never going to play for 2 more years, how much are you risking with that, right? Because is he going to develop under that? Because I don't think people know that he doesn't get any time in practice. Like there's no working in practice. When the season starts, there's no the backup QB, you know, holds a clipboard. That's why they mostly become coaches, because like they spend most of their season there. So how is Love going to get better in an NFL game if he spends the next year or two standing around again, right? Like I mean, this is a really nuanced conversation, but if you want to simplify it, if you bring Aaron Rodgers back, the only way you're going to get an extended look at Jordan Love is if something horrible happens and he gets a bad injury. Right. And that's nobody wants to talk. That's not what anybody wants.
So right now, that's your best case scenario for him getting an extended look. And like nobody wants to evaluate him under that microscope because you've already known your season is tanked. And if you went into that season with Aaron Rodgers and expecting to compete again, he gets hurt, who's to say you're going to run some of these other guys out there that you would be running with Aaron Rodgers? Right. So now Jordan Love is playing with backups again.
And you want the full
Love has had it rough. OTAs he's had it rough. Stuff like that. I mean, he's had it rough in the times he's had to start and play. You know, this year he was thrown in with the Aaron Rodgers. It was like a surprise COVID thing.
Yeah.
You know, there's not a lot of time to prepare around that. Like that. You know, so nobody knows what he has. I was just, and by the way, I'm not knocking on him. I understand he's a quarterback in development, saying he's not Joe Burrow. And that's why I just say, like, he's not going to come in, though, after not having any time ever. And the Packers are going to go out and be what they are with Aaron Rodgers. I think that a lot of fans get too attached to that.
Yeah. And, you know, I said at this point, if you determine that Jordan Love is already bad, that, you know, your argument's not really worth listening to.
Right.
Like, that is true. But also you have odds on your side that it's not going to work out 3 times in a row the way it worked out. So like the odds are in your favor.
The odds are never in your favor. The odds are never in your favor. Right. You know what I mean? Like if it's like, is this my quarterback? I've never seen him play regardless of his pedigree. The odds, regardless of what you think, are not in your favor.
Yes.
Every single time you do it, you're rolling the dice, and it's not a sure bet.
Tell you what, I would say it does make a difference, you know, with a quarterback and having them, you know, start off the season and all of the reps in training camp. And obviously that's, you know, what held Justin Fields back, you know, from the Bears this year, just not getting those reps. And, you know, obviously I'm not a quarterback. I don't play the position, but I think Matt would probably say we've had Matt on a few times. It makes a difference between, you know, being thrown into, you know, emergency because of COVID, as opposed to the whole week, you get all the starters reps. I'm sure that makes a difference.
Well, at the beginning of the year, and you guys know, and I talk about this all the time, people think I sound crazy, but things seem to happen when, you know, out for what I'm talking about. Well, in the middle of the summer, I said, look for Mac Jones to be the starter in New England, and just it won't be Cam Newton. And people are like, you're friggin' crazy. Like, they've got Cam Newton, they're going to develop Jones. I said they can't. You can't develop once the season starts. Yeah. Jones had a lot of things to work on, and he can't work on those things if they don't make him the starter. Especially
if you're running the Cam Newton offense, like he's not gonna.
But I'm just saying, like, you can't have a quarterback come in and not play in the games and not work through these things and develop. if you don't do that. And so people were like, "You're crazy. There's no way." They've got to keep Cam in there, and then maybe halfway through the season bring in Matt. I'm like, it doesn't make sense. And it's kind of the same thing with Love. That's what I'm saying. Like, it makes more sense to get what you can for Rodgers now, just like Danielle said, and see what you got with Love over the next season. Because I'm telling you guys, I've said this multiple times on here, the next season after this is going to be a good quarterback draft, but 2 years from now,
yes,
is going to be it's going to be off the charts quarterback talent draft. And if you're the Packers, I go, well, if we keep Rodgers for one more year, okay, good. That's fine too, but we've got to see what Love has the following year regardless. So that's because they need to know, so that next year, 2 years from now, 2 drafts from now, they can go, we're going to get a special talent over here. But that's why I see it.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That's why I see it better getting what
to the same side on this one.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Well, there is one thing I want to find out, from Packers people here. What are the Bears getting from the new offensive coordinator, Luke Getsy?
Well, I mean, for one, like, you have a guy that Rodgers loves, Luke Getsy. Like, he's talked highly of him in every time his name has been brought up in, pressers or conversations. But there's that apprehensiveness, right? If you're a Bears fan, of, I'm sure he didn't, what could he really have taught Aaron Rodgers, which is probably true. And then you say, like, well, he didn't develop Jordan Love, so, like, why do we believe he can be good developing, like, a Justin Fields? But I mean, if you like, I think you turn that around, right? You say, like, I'm sure Aaron Rodgers probably showed Luke Getsy a hell of a lot of stuff that he could take with him elsewhere, right? And, as someone that, like, I root for these guys when they go other places, like, I'm obviously not going to root for the Bears to be great because they have Luke Getsy now or anything. But, like,
you don't have your Luke Getsy jersey?
It would be a more fun division if Justin Fields were good, though. It would be a way better division, right? It would just be more fun in general.
I got into a really long, like, discussion with somebody a couple of weeks ago. I was like, I genuinely hope, like, not to leave out the Vikings and the Lions in this combo, but, like, if Love and Fields are both good, like, that's a real rivalry that, like, we've never actually seen, right? Where the teams are good at the same time. But to Getsy in general, I mean, I think the Matt LaFleur coaching tree started this year, right? Like, we're going to see what happens with Getsy going to the Bears and Nathaniel Hackett and the tight ends coach going to Denver to be their OC. Like, Matt LaFleur's been a dynamite coach, and if his tree starts now and being successful, I think that's a bigger feather in his cap. But you're getting coaches from an offensive unit that has been extremely consistent for 3 years.
And that's the Shanahan tree too, right?
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, McVay.
The system has proven to work.
Yeah.
I mean,
and that's
Jared
what,
Goff
to me,
was in a Super Bowl, for God's sakes.
That's
You'd love to see.
that's what's exciting about all of what's happening, I think, a lot in this offseason with all these coaches too. Like, you're actually seeing the NFL finally turn right, even though the Texans hired Lovie Smith, right? Like,
oh, I love that. I love Lovie Smith.
I know, but I'm tired of the guy they hire. We recycle the same trash.
Yeah,
I don't. Yeah. And no offense to Lovie, right? But like, this has been going on for years. Like, you can only win 3 games at one stop, and then 2 years later you're a head coach somewhere else, and you get fired 2 years later. But they just keep, like, recycling the same. This is kind of exciting to see all these young dudes coming in, getting the chances. I mean, you even got a lot of females, like, growing in the game, that are linebacker coaches, quarterback coaches, and some of them are stepping into these other roles. Like, it's exciting to see the league getting some turnover and change and letting this new stuff develop, because all these guys, this whole little circle, has such exciting changes to the way the NFL game is being played with new offenses, new defensive schemes. I mean, there's a lot going on here.
The Lions are exciting. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, are you excited for the new Lions offensive coordinator?
Yeah,
Ben Johnson. I mean, but again, I mentioned this probably like 6 or 7 weeks ago. I said, don't be surprised if this is the name, because everybody was talking about big names, right?
Yeah.
Who's going to be out there? And I said, don't be surprised if it's not this tight ends coach that nobody's ever heard of.
So I will ask you though about that, like, do you think he took a big part in developing, like, TJ Hawkinson, or do you think Hawkinson came in, like, ready?
Well, Hawkinson came in, but the big part of the development is how, if you watch the Lions, these guys know I was all over it, having rants during the season when Campbell first started calling plays and how basic, boring, horrible it looked. As the Lions developed over the season, it became out that it was, Ben Johnson he was doing this development and coming up with different schemes and creating these plays. Although he wasn't calling the plays in the game, he was creating these plays and creating this system. And that's pretty exciting to know. But yeah, Hawkinson, like, you're not going to develop. I mean, you're not going to develop talent, but you can develop skill levels. Hawkinson, you're not going to change his talent. I mean, Rob Gronkowski is probably one of like the least athletic tight ends to ever play the game, right? But he's amazing, and him and Tom Brady know how to work together, right? So, you look at some of these guys. Hawkinson is an athlete, and you can't coach that. You can't coach when a guy has athletic ability. However, you can coach when a guy knows where to be on the field at the right time, which is what Gronkowski became really known for. And I think Hawkinson, unfortunately, he got the season-ending injury this year, but he started to show early in the season. He started to show a better guy who ran proper routes, who stopped in zone coverages, who knew how to stop in the hole, who knew how to find the hole in the coverages. And Goff was having this cushion early on in the season when they had him to find the hole in the zone, find the hole in the man coverages, and draw these guys inside. So I do think he did have obviously some say in the development of him. Obviously, he's not the full development of him, but he did a good job with what he had. It's sad that because the way that Amon-Ra St. Brown developed over the season, they had Hawkinson, working with him.
Might have hit that over.
Oh man, but just saying work-wise, this year was a work-wise for the Lions. This wasn't about going to the playoffs or winning, but this was getting guys understanding real NFL football. And again, you have those two guys working together in games during the season, whether Goff's there over the next 2 or 3 years, who knows? But you have these guys working in game situations, and that's where the development comes from. And it would have been nice to see those guys develop together, right? I mean, again, you had an Edelman and a Gronk in New England. Those guys develop together, right? So that's kind of what you want to see. You want to see these guys get to work together and do those things. As a Lions fan this year, again, you weren't looking for playoff hopes or nothing like that. But, you definitely want to see your young talent.
That was about as good as it could have gone, honestly. Like, realistically speaking, that's about as good as it could have gone, right? There's some ups and some downs, but you're like, oh, you know what? Like, like what you're seeing on the field, and like, we talk the Lions, about schemes, and every once in a while.
The Lions were in games they had no business being.
Yeah, they were playing the hell.
Well, that's what we talked about it during the season, and they could have easily won 4 or 5 more games than they did on the stat sheet at the end of the season. And they could have beat some really good teams. They played the team that's about to play in the Super Bowl. They only lost by a couple touchdowns, and they were actually winning the game and in the game all the way until the middle of the fourth quarter against the Rams. So, I mean, they had their moments this year, and they played for, we talked about this, really, there was not a lot of NFL skilled talent on the field, especially when you lost your star tight end. There was you had rookies developing, and you had 3rd and 4th and 5th wide string receivers out there. So again, it's a young team developing. It looked good. Ben Johnson, again, the guy that I called out probably 6-7 weeks ago, that I wouldn't be shocked to have seen him become the O coordinator, is now the O coordinator, because the way he developed that. The way he developed the scheme for them to use on Sundays started to develop. Again, you saw over the last 6 weeks of the season, right? We went from bland and stupid and boring to all of a sudden having one of the most exciting rookie receivers on the field that doesn't get a lot of recognition because he's on the Lions, but there's a lot of special plays made. And then how that offense was...
Unfortunately for us, the Lions got the better St. Brown brother, it looks like, because
Equanimous or whatever.
Equanimous.
Wait, are they they're brothers? I guess I should know and should.
Yeah,
that's
brothers,
actually, man, their parents are awesome.
Oh yeah, their dad.
They love ancient Egypt.
Their dad was legit like Mr. Olympia. Like their their bloodline is like ridiculous. And their youngest brother, Osiris, who's on USC. Like he's a baller too. Like they're all three going to be in the NFL.
Dude, how could you not if you walked into a room and you're like, "Yo, what's up? I'm Osiris."
And
is this a weird? Is this kind
they're all Egyptian gods? I mean,
yeah, they're like they love like Egyptian mythology, like their family. Does, so
is this a weird, bizarre world where maybe the Lions have less question marks going into the offseason than the rest of us?
Then yeah.
It could be because they started their rebuild first, right? Like they were in year one of it already. And it's kind of crazy. Like all four of these teams are rebuilding from like the Lions started theirs last year, right? Like they got their GM and their coach last year. Like the Packers are doing a coaching overhaul for a different reason because they've been so good. Their coaches are getting poached.
Yeah.
Right.
And you got the Bears and the Vikings. They got new regimes coming in. So like this entire division is going to be new coaching staffs.
It's pretty wild.
Going to be a lot to talk about. And that's why I was going to, Cooper, with you. I mean, the presumptive new Vikings coach, last week you're kind of like, blah. I mean,
last week I was so high on Harbaugh mania.
He's got a nice Superman jaw. And
you think about it, right? It's the boring one. And I'm like, I like to, make memes. So it's like, we got a piece of milk toast. But then you think about it and it makes sense. I said this last week too. It makes sense. That's probably the safer haul, especially if you bring Harbaugh in and you didn't necessarily like what he had to say, and you're like, actually, you know what? No, we weren't planning on this anyway. Let's just go with the guy who actually impressed us. And the players responded. The players reviewed him higher than any of the other candidates, which really matters to the Wilfs after what they let happen with the old regime, right? So Kevin O'Connell, I'm on board. I'm excited to see. I'm excited to run 11 personnel for once. That's one tight end, one back, and then 3 wide receivers. And because I think we have some good blocking receivers as well, I think that'll be fun. But yeah, mostly we're just waiting and seeing because he hasn't really taken charge, right? He's focusing on the Super Bowl. We know who the we're pretty sure that the defensive coordinator is down to a couple different people. Let's see. Now I'm blanking on it. I want to say, I keep thinking Donatello.
Yeah.
It's Donatello. So
it's interesting. You talk about some of these coordinators, and a lot of the coordinators are kind of retreads and things like that, and that's what you want to see.
And they're rising, right? So Donatello, he's been around, but he's been Vic Fangio's like guy for a while, and you never know with those people. You just never really know. Could be they're an integral part, and they really understand the genius, and it could be that they just happen to know their one particular part in the wheel, and that doesn't really make you a good coordinator. It just means that maybe you're good at like this thing, right? But
Adam Gase.
Exactly. There's a lot of them. Adam Gase, the Vikings have had a couple. So I would be fine with that. And I think the interesting thing, though, the only thing that's been interesting to me about the coordinator search is that a lot of these guys run 3-4 defenses, and the Vikings under Zimmer been a 4-3 for a long time, and no one really runs either of those, honestly, but that's kind of how they're classified.
Yeah, base isn't really a thing in the NFL.
Yeah, and no one's running 4 linebackers out on the field. Come on. But yeah, they're running like 1 linebacker and 7 DBs, which would be interesting if we had any of those either. So I'm excited for that change, because I do think we have a sneaky good personnel that will work with all like a lot of the sub packages that you have to run out of when you're running 3-4, right? Danielle Hunter can rush standing up. When Zimmer was actually a good defensive coach before he lost it a little bit, he noticed, because Hunter, when he was a rookie, was on the scout team, and he was scout teaming, like it was like Von Miller or something like that. I can't remember. I forgot who it was, but it was a classic 3-4 rusher. And he's like, oh, you have to rush standing up. And he was like better at it. And they're like, oh, well, let's just have him do that more. So Danielle Hunter, if they decide to keep him, he can absolutely be that stand-up DE. Tomlinson paid really good in New York as a 3-4 DE, really solid. And then you just need your lockdown tackle. And if you're gonna run with 1 linebacker, Eric Kendricks is the perfect linebacker to run with. All right, I feel like you either pick him, Devin White, or Fred Warner. Like exactly, right.
Just pick one of the 3.
Wow,
exactly. And then we could get rid of Barr. We have a couple guys coming up, younger guys that aren't bad, right? We have a big nickel that we drafted as a safety. I could see it all working out for sure. And so I'm excited about that change mostly. And then, God, is there anything else? What else interesting happened this week? Oh, people said nice things about Kirk Cousins, which is great. It came out that O'Connell said nice things about him, which, like, I mean, come on. Like, that's awesome. And if he believes them and he's like, Kirk Cousins is the guy I'm going to bring this around, I'm like, all right, if you say so. Wouldn't be my choice, but this guy's a lot more qualified. And this system
So what do they
really good? Go ahead. Sorry.
What I was just gonna ask, what do they have to pay him next year? Like, because he's on the team.
$45 million. $45 million guaranteed.
All guaranteed. Oh my God.
Yeah, he's right below Matt Ryan and right above Aaron Rodgers as of right now for the 2022 cap.
He likes that.
Yeah, he does like that.
He does like that.
Yeah, and the one thing that we got with that god awful extension, and like I don't want to talk about the player as much, but the first extension for Kirk Cousins, so they could make room to sign a nose tackle who opted out. Like, Jesus. but what I like about the extension is there's now a no trade clause, so we could potentially trade him. And we talked about earlier, there's a really big market for quarterbacks this year. There's many teams he could land on. If O'Connell says no, and he blew everyone out of the water with his interviews, like, this is how you get it out of Kirk Cousins, I will be there, like you folks, just cheering him on. Let's go, Cousins. Probably time to move on for all this. Like, we talked about it, right? I could say exactly what Monty said the first 5 minutes of this show. Monty said exactly what I would say about the Vikings, which is like, we could run it back. There's stuff there, but it probably just makes sense not to. Right? The Vikings aren't as bad as the rest of the team, so I think we're fourth or fifth worst cap situation. 15 mil over the cap. 0 defensive backs who can play in the NFL. Maybe a half if you count. If you count Cam Dantzler, you get a half, right? And we have Danielle Hunter, who's if we on the third day of the league year is guaranteed $26 million, right? Because of the way we reworked his contract last year. It makes sense for me to go a new direction. And I think there's 2 options that the Vikings can do. And if O'Connell wants to play with Kirk, that's fine. I love it, right? You can't extend him too far, though. I don't want to be paying void years on Kirk Cousins' contract in 2025.
I was going to say 5 years from now.
Like... You can see it. You can see it, though, because he's not taking a deal. Like, regardless of what you think about him, that man is not taking a deal. Derek Carr is going to play for $20 million next year. If Kirk Cousins played for $20 million, this team could be a contender.
I mean, I think that obviously this entire offseason is going to be like swirling around and focused on Aaron Rodgers, but I think there's a better chance that a quarterback like Kirk or like Russell Wilson changes teams, to be honest with you. Yeah. Like, I think that's the big bombshell quarterback move in the offseason.
Yeah, there has to be a couple. We don't know what they're going to be, right? And I don't want to put it all on him either, because sometimes I go in on him. I want to mention that there's several contracts that are really bad. Harrison Smith just signed a 32-year-old corner or 32-year-old safety to the biggest extension that a safety's ever gotten. Like, come on. Like, Dalvin Cook's making too much money, right? He's really good, right? Really good until he gets nicked up and he loses his step, and then he's just pretty good, and then he's off the field and he's worthless, right? And it's like, okay, we're going to pay him $13 million. I know Green Bay likes to pay their linebackers. Minnesota maybe right behind them, where, Anthony Barr is probably gone, but Kendricks is going to make a $13 million next year too. And like, there's all these, Rick Spielman slightly overpaid all the really good players on the roster. Adam Thielen, really good player. He's going to make $18 million next year. And like, it's just like, no, like you can't give the full bag to everyone. Right?
Yeah. And I feel like when it's become a generic phrase now, partly because of the Packers, but like you keep saying run it back. Like, I believe that if you want to break things down to be as basic as possible, I don't believe any team is one player away from like winning a title, especially like if you're not winning your division like consistently, how do you argue that you're one player away from like being able to win it all, even if that player is a quarterback? Because like, again, we've seen systems in the Shanahan tree, like you've gotten Jimmy Garoppolo to a Super Bowl, you've gotten Jared Goff to a Super Bowl. So like, even if you're one player short, one player away as a QB, like if you're not winning your division consistently, like, I don't get how you're saying like, if we run it back and get just this one more player, then we're definitely going to go all the way.
We've been doing that for years too, and the Vikings need 6 more players, and they're 15 million over the cap, right? And the Vikings need to clear $30 million to sign their draft picks. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, no, like you have to stop. We did it, right? We went in. We put void years.
Their all-in season was that first Kirk Cousins year, pretty much.
It was, and 2019 is when it kind of fell apart, and it was like, oh, that was unfortunate. It didn't really work out. And then once you get that success, you start making stupid choices as a front office, right? And you do dumb things to chase it
because nobody wants to get fired.
There. Yeah, and then now no one has a job, right? So why would the regime come in and do the same thing? You know what I mean? Like you're going to extend them.
The closer you can stick to what's considered successful for your franchise, you're going to keep doing, because nobody wants to lose that job. So if bringing that quarterback back every year keeps you closer to that, then you feel like you buy yourself some time.
So speaking of a team that's done it completely opposite of many teams that's in the Super Bowl, the Rams and the Lions, Grubb, are they Lions fans? Everyone kind of living vicariously through Stafford.
I mean, you got to, right?
Right.
Yeah. You got to, right? And not just, obviously as a Lions fan looking at it that way, but he was really good to that community in Detroit, him and his wife, and they went through so much there with her brain surgeries and all the things that they went through. That was really close to the community in Detroit, right? And so it's kind of one of those things where you have to root, you have to root for him as a Lions fan. It was tough to see him go, obviously. But you gotta. This is like the best it's gotten for the Lions in a long time, and I know it has to do with a quarterback on another team, but you gotta root for a guy, and like I say, just to see what they have been through as a family. I think a lot of people in the NFL should be rooting for him.
Stafford deserves it. He deserves it. He deserves it.
I saw that meme. It was like Stafford as the quarterback and Eminem at the halftime show. Like, this is the closest Detroit gets to the Super Bowl.
Oh my god.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too. You don't just have Stafford. You got Eminem. So it's, but yeah, I mean, how could you not live through the guy and as a Detroit fan, feel a part of it? You're so close to him. He's been such a part of the team for such a long time. And like I say, just so close to, so they still have so many things going on in the Detroit community, him and his wife there. And so it's like, it's one of those like sentimental things.
But I mean, the Rams, they have to do it, right? Like in order for all this to be worth it, they got to have to win the whole thing.
If they don't win the Super Bowl again, they've gone all in. Let's, like we were talking about the Vikings a couple years ago, and we're talking about looking at the Packers trying to do that next season. If you don't get it this season, if you're the Rams, I don't know how they pull it off down the future road with no first round draft picks and the contracts they have to sign.
Oh man, I love the strategy, to be honest. I like people because it's always a fringe strategy until someone tries it and has success with it, and then it's like, oh wow, just never. Like, because draft picks are volatile no matter what,
for
right?
Sure, yeah.
And veterans are not that volatile when you trade high draft picks for them usually, right? So it's like you know what it's like a high. It's like
you see how important the Super Bowl is, right? The Broncos did it; they went all in with Peyton Manning, and then they went all in around Peyton Manning, and they did what they could do for a few seasons, and they prayed for a Super Bowl, and they got it. And
the Rams identify, they say, okay, our weak link is the quarterback, right? Like,
right.
Are there any quarterbacks in the next X amount of years that we can guarantee a first round pick will
they've traded their first round picks for Ramsey. They've got, I don't think they have a first round pick till 2025, right? Is that what it is?
Yeah. And that's the thing. So everyone they've moved one for is a guy that, like, you would get on your knees and pray that your first round pick is as good as a Jalen.
It's been insane, really. Especially when like volatile players like Ramsey all of a sudden are just like, really good team guys and stuff like that. It's pretty shocking. And one other thing, when you do that, you get the Odell Beckhams. And you get the Von Millers, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, I'll go there and win a Super Bowl, and that's the underrated part is when you're all in. That's and Odell Beckham falls on your lap. Like, how fortuitous.
And I don't think we can discount the fact that, like, yes, it's legit LA, right? Like, I'm sure you guys did a show about like the Odell to Green Bay versus LA situation, and like even if they could offer equal money, which the Packers couldn't, but even if they could, like, I would not think Odell Beckham would pick the Packers and being in Green Bay over the second part of the season versus LA when both teams are legitimate contenders. Like, it'd be different if the Rams were garbage, right? But like they've been a front runner all year as like in terms of Super Bowl odds. So
well, and I definitely don't think you'd see the same Odell Beckham playoff run that you've seen this season in Green Bay when it was 0 degrees in the game.
That's to argue. Yeah, I mean,
so you're not going to get the same out of him that you're seeing. You know, he doesn't have to play in the 0 degree weather in a playoff game. So
we talked. I mean, you guys like brought up overreactions earlier. Like, do you think that's going to be an overreaction now, or like people see the Bucs last year going all in, like whatever, mortgaging the future? They won a Super Bowl. If the Rams do double what the Bucs just did, they went more all in. If they win it this year and won a Super Bowl, like they say copycat league, like our team's going to start just being like, you know what, screw these draft picks. Like, we want vets, and like we're going to try to build mega teams.
You know, financially, it makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, when a team wins a Super Bowl, I mean, as a Bears fan, I mean, everywhere in Chicago, it's still 1985. So, I mean,
as long as you're not doing it with free agents, you might be all right. But these teams get themselves in trouble trying to sign these giant free agent contracts to these vets too.
Yeah, so Washington tried it too, and it didn't work so hot.
Oh, they tried for so long. Yeah.
Miami tried it. They signed everybody under the sun. They, Wallace and Sue and.
But that's why you got to trade. Yeah. That's why you got to trade.
Yep.
I think that's the only way to do it. Is like, I'm going to trade a very high asset for this player.
Well, like Von Miller, right? You get Von Miller in this year. And you get lucky with Odell Beckham, and they literally release him, and he goes through waivers, and you don't even have to pay that. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. So that was kind of falling in your lap. But yeah, the Von Miller thing where the Broncos agree to pay portions of the I mean, if you can do that, like, I mean, that's huge. That's huge. Instead of paying one guy, $100 million over a 3-year span off free agency, it's like.
And I mean, I think it's depending on what franchise you're talking about, right? I mean, like the Bucs had won one. I would not going to say recently, but like we all remember that Super Bowl. Like that was 2002, I think. So it's not like terribly long ago.
Seems recent to me based on my experience.
Yeah, like if you're a franchise that has never won one period, or it's been 30, 40 years, like winning one, like that probably buys you like 10 years of job security as like a front office, right? Like
for sure.
If you win that, like people have been
waiting. Well, not if you're in Philadelphia.
Like, I feel like you're just kind of like, all right, we've done it. Like now we'll have to reset. We'll be bad while we reset, but everyone's got good vibes off of this. Like
for sure.
Just saw us win the whole thing.
Yeah.
If not if you're in Philadelphia or if you coach for Jerry Jones or have any those two places, it doesn't matter how you win your Super Bowl.
All right, guys.
Great. I would say great stuff. Danielle, do you have anything coming up this week that you wanted to plug?
What am I doing this after the Super Bowl? March 3rd.
March 3rd.
Hash mark?
The Hash Mark Show. Yeah. My Bears guy. So he's allowing you on as a Packers voice.
Yeah, he wants me on regularly, actually. So
very good.
We'll see how that goes. But so yeah, I guess that's on YouTube, March 3rd. Not sure what time yet, but I'll let you know.
Good. Very good. And obviously, thanks for joining us, Monty. Where can everyone find you?
So I do a show once a week, and it airs on Thursdays with Game On. It's called 4 Downs, and I do that with my partner Aaron Rodgers. So the new episode we recorded tonight, actually, it's going to be out tomorrow.
Very nice. Right. And Grubb, you're back. You also do some other shows. We have given you an opportunity to plug some of your shows as well.
Right. Well, Gridiron Grub podcast, you can find me on. It's an all NFL podcast. You can find me at Gridiron Grub on Twitter. And that's where you can find me now, other than the beach.
Ooh, in Florida.
And Cooper, we can find you on Vikings Twitter memes, huh?
Sometimes you can find me here. You can find me arguing about very minute details on Twitter as well. But mostly catch me here. It's a much better look.
Absolutely. And NFL updated, catch me as well. And I think we're going to keep going. Hopefully next week, and we'll have some more Lions talk. Definitely more Vikings talk when they have an official coach. And thanks again, everyone.
Yeah, thanks.
Good night. Thanks, Monty.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me.